don't know anything about saving worlds, but you do.
Trust me, kid, I'm no hero. You were an X-Man. You were the X-Man. I am soaking wet right now.
Here we are with our review of Deadpool and Wolverine, the latest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the only entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe this year. They'd gotten into a habit of putting out multiple movies a year. Not 2024. It's just this one. I guess you have the double strike to thank for that, with all the other projects getting pushed. It's the third Deadpool movie. This is directed by Sean Levy, and it stars Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. We're going to give some spoiler-free thoughts because it's days away from its release. That you'll probably be hearing this like the day before it comes out, or the day it comes out, or something like that. So we'll try to keep it light spoilers, but in order to talk about this movie, we have to kind of spoil it. Like, it's going to be hard for us to really talk about why we feel about this movie, the way we feel about this movie, without like actually talking about it. So we're going to have to spoil it. So if you want to wait to see it, you can pause it and come back. We're going to do some light spoiler-free thoughts right now, and then get into a full spoiler discussion of the movie. So, Hunter, what did you think of Deadpool and Wolverine? A Disney product, a Kevin Feige production.
Yeah. From the sick, twisted mind of the Adam Project, and Real Steel. So here's the thing.
From the guy that brought you the Night at the Museum trilogy.
So here's the thing about this movie. After the movie, we saw this together last night, and I think that the first thing, if not the very first thing I said to you, one of the first things I said to you was like, I think I'm out. I think I'm done. I have officially, like, I was already like had one leg off the train post Endgame, but I was still like trying to like skip along, like, oh, maybe I'll get back on. Maybe there'll be something to bring me back in. And this movie kind of broke me in a way that, like, I don't even think I could fully articulate at the theater, because we saw it at a press screening, but I will say it was a positive press screening. Like, people mostly in the theaters.
Yeah. Maybe like, not overwhelmingly, but yeah.
Not overwhelmingly, but like it was more of like, usually whenever we go to these screenings, even if it's something that is great, something that rocks, like even something like I think we saw Dune Part 2 together, like the reception is a little bit muffled in the crowd. Like, even if people all really like it, it's generally pretty quiet. Like, there's some moments that we'll get into in spoilers where like I heard like an audible like yes happening from like a fucking guy who's like a certified critic happening next to us. So because of that, I don't want to be an asshole. Like, and I'm sorry. I know that some people are going to listen to this and they're going to be like, fuck this guy. You're being an idiot. You don't understand meta humor.
You can tear this movie apart. It's okay.
I think this movie, one, I think that it's shit. And two, I think that this is like actually like the problem with movies. I think that this, it took me some time to kind of articulate everything, and it kind of coalesced with like a long, like uninterrupted 20-minute rant to wife of the pod Gaia last night of just yelling at her about this movie.
A true soldier in the battlefield.
For me to just come home,
I didn't take a knee for all the wives and girlfriends that have to deal with guys talking about Deadpool this week.
I know. And for the most part, it's going to be the opposite reaction. It's going to be like, dude, but then like but they're kind of gay though. Like, it's going to be that. It's going to be the worst people that you've ever met in your entire life.
Disney, and that's because, and that's why.
Well, and they talk about it. Because you break before he talked to me. He was talking to me specifically. I like this movie it's such a movie for babies. I think that it has reached a point, and I should say, back it up. I liked the first Deadpool when it first came out for what it was. Deadpool 2, I think, was so bad that it made me go back and revisit Deadpool 1, and has just kind of like soured everything in my mind. Deadpool 1, whenever it first came out, it did feel a little bit fresh, but now we have so many hats upon hats at this point that it's so referential. Disney, if they weren't already at a point of a fucking snake eating its own tail, we're there now. We're beyond that. We are now at a fucking nerdy neckbeard motherfucker sucking his own cock. Like, that is where we are at, the level of just self-referential, self-fellatiating levels that we have reached in this, that is just pointing at screen and saying, remember this thing? It sucked, but you remember it, so you're gonna clap.
And I'm telling you it sucks. The movie is telling you it sucks, so therefore it's all excused. It's okay, because we're telling you about how it sucks and you still remember it, so therefore you like it. Marvel and Disney are very clearly, I think that this movie, they're making a point to say, we are no longer interested in getting everybody to see our movies. We are just wanting to please the super fans. And here's the thing. The super fans are going to see this movie and they are going to fucking love it. There was people who we saw who this scratched whatever Deadpool and Wolverine itch that they wanted to have. For me, I'm out. Like, I'm done. I'm done with these movies. I'm not wasting any more of my life. No, you're not excited for Captain America Brave New World? No.
I could not give less of a shit. Honestly, like, I don't want to devote any more of my mental space to this world. I think I'm just done. I'm out. I'm done.
So that's a good place for me to jump in, because again, I saw Twisters today to wash off the stench of this movie. And Twisters is a dumb movie. It's a silly movie, but it's a movie that still respects the audience. Deadpool and Wolverine is a movie that insults your time, your patience, and your intelligence as an audience member. It is actively mocking you for taking time out of your day to see it, for driving to the movie theater and investing your money and time and life into it. It's saying, isn't it, aren't you a fucking idiot? Isn't it funny that, like, you're so stupid? That's like the attitude that this movie has. And, you know, to some extent, it's fun. Like, that's part of the appeal of Deadpool, is to be that crass and that ironic and sarcastic and rude. It's part of the DNA of the character, but it's not all the character is. There's in the comics, there's a lot of other things that Deadpool is, and the movie, the Ryan Reynolds version of the character is not necessarily interested in that, in kind of the darker, sadder version. And they attempt it here, and it kind of falls really flat.
It's so nothing. You cannot like be like pulling your dick up, be like, oh, look at me, I'm Epic, I'm Deadpool, and then be like, but I'm also kind of sad though too.
Yeah,
like you can't do both of those things.
I want to matter. Yeah. So just to back up a second, I didn't necessarily have hope in this movie. I revisited Deadpool 2 before this. Different director, David Leitch, the Fall Guy director. But I was kind of putting myself in the headspace of like what a Deadpool movie is. I didn't revisit the first one. I remember enjoying that first one a lot and kind of feeling like it was this scrappy underdog of a movie, kind of like the little movie that could type of thing. There's none of that in Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 is kind of like a doo-doo garbage mess. But there was still a shred of enjoyment in there. It's hard to grab onto a lot there, but I didn't feel like it was total garbage. And so I went I went into Deadpool and Wolverine with some of that same sentiment of like, okay, what can we do here that keeps this from being a total failure? And the answer to that is Hugh Jackman. I think that Hugh Jackman saves this movie from being a total disaster, in my opinion. And there's a lot of this movie that doesn't work. The majority of this movie honestly doesn't work. And very little of that is due to Hugh Jackman returning as Wolverine. I have the Logan poster here in my office. If people are turning into the video podcast, I'm a huge fan of not only that film, but of Hugh Jackman as an actor in this role. And I think that there is enough here in this movie of Hugh Jackman acting his ass off that makes it worth seeing to an extent. And I totally agree with your point of this movie being more for the diehard fans than for anyone else. And we'll get into the specifics of all that in spoilers. But for everyone else, if they go see this movie, there's a good chance that they're going to walk out and say that sucked. But there's also a good chance that they'll say, hey, I didn't feel like it was a total waste of time because of Hugh Jackman. So that's kind of my main takeaway. You know, I went into it with very middling expectations. I think that part of me was hoping that this movie was going to do more to advance the overall story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and kind of where we're at with the X-Men and mutants and all of that. Didn't quite get that. I don't want to get into too many specifics yet, but I did. There was a little piece of me that was thinking like, okay, can this be a big flag planted in the MCU to let us know what the fuck is going on? Because part of my enjoyment of these movies is the interconnectedness, the idea. That's what made the legendary run so legendary, so effective, culminating in Infinity War and Endgame. Is you felt there were these place markers, right? You felt like there was momentum in the overall story. And post Endgame, we haven't really had that, and we keep waiting for that. And it's just nowhere to be found. And I was really hoping that this movie was going to do that. And I feel silly that I expected that, because there is nothing in this movie that comes close to doing that. I will say another redemptive thing is the action sequences, which I can point out some specifics there. But I found myself enjoying the bloody, brutal action in this movie.
I think that's one thing that I disagree with you on. It's a lot of this movie, and I get it's like almost the whole thing with Deadpool is like, haha, he's immature. But also, like, I kind of felt like I'm just like, I'm not trying to be condescending for listeners who do love this, but I feel like I'm too old for this shit. I'm too old for the Deadpool character. It feels immature in a way of like, I like the first Deadpool, but I was also still like 19 when I saw the first Deadpool. And so like, I'm an adult now who has to like pay taxes and shit. Like I'm kind of too old for like the like, oh, it's schlocky and like blood and guts everywhere. Like, I'm not saying like I'm above necessarily like
it gets
gaudy
repetitive.
Overindulgence, but yeah, exactly. It was just a thing where it's like, we're just doing the same thing again, aren't we?
It doesn't feel inventive. There's a point where it's just like, okay, we're kind of redoing the same scene over and over.
You know, it is funny though that like it's interesting what you're saying about how you wanted it to do more in setting up where we are in the Marvel timeline. And I actually think that's one of the worst things about this movie is that I think that it does too much. That it's just like, well, we have to get with like the TVA and everything else. And it's like, I don't fucking care about any of this. Like that is more of a thing. But again, like they get away with it because Deadpool's at one point, he looks at the camera and says, we're all sick of the multiverse, right, guys? So that way we're now allowed to forgive the 45 minutes of trash exposition that we get in this movie. whatever. That's another thing I'll say for spoilers to specifically dive into that whole aspect. Going back to Hugh Jackman, I do agree with you that I think that he is probably the aspect that makes this movie better than Deadpool 2. But it's still talking about like what are the degrees of separation here, at least for me. Like, I think Hugh Jackman is an incredible actor. I love Hugh Jackman. I love Logan. I think a lot of the X-Men movies are terrible, personally. Like the Bryan Singer one. Sorry, I don't feel ashamed to insult Bryan Singer and tell him that he made fucking god-awful movies. But I think that like a lot of those movies are bad, and just because you like point at them and say, remember how bad these were, that doesn't suddenly make it funny or make for an interesting story that you're trying to tell. And like, that isn't to say that Deadpool and Wolverine doesn't have any laughs in it, because I think I did laugh. I audibly laughed at multiple points in this movie. But also when the volume of jokes is as high as Deadpool and Wolverine is, you should get at least some laughs. Like there's a couple of jokes in there. We'll talk about one spoiler specifically where there's a character who shows up and Ryan Reynolds has the line of like, who is your dialogue coach? The Minions, which is very funny. That is a great joke and it made me laugh. But also like, that's the only joke that made me laugh in the last 7 minutes when you've told approximately like 47 other jokes at the same time. So the hit rate still is not there. I just kind of think this movie isn't, I kind of think it doesn't really have like any merits to exist. Like, I kind of just think that we should blast this movie into the sun. I think like you're saying that it didn't do enough to set up the Marvel Universe. I think this solidified for me that I don't like where the Marvel Universe is going. And so
you want off the ride.
I'm really interested to see what not just the day one reception, because I'm sure this is going to get like an A or an A+ audience cinema score, because they always take it day one. And that's when the fucking diehards are going to go to this. Yeah. But I want to see what is the reception to this movie on week 2, week 3, right? Because I think there's a lot of people in this movie.
The reviews are probably going to be pretty mixed. It might get like a 70 Rotten Tomatoes or something like that, or maybe even lower than that.
I don't know, man. I'm looking on like Letterboxd at some people that I like, and like, I feel like I'm more negative on it than even some people that I know. Like there's a couple people I follow who gave it like 3.5, 4 stars, even like 2.5 stars. And like, I'm sorry, this movie's worse than mediocre. Like this is a bad movie. And like, I really wonder, there's a lot of fan service that's happening that frankly, I only even understood the fan service because of like, knowing you who's a comic book fan, having some vague awareness, but like, is some guy in their 40s going to know who like cameo number X is? Right. Like, again, I don't want to say something cameos are, but it's just like, do people even know who that is? Do people have a relationship with that character? Or is this just like, you're going to hear people clapping in the audience around them and be like, who the fuck is that?
In a lot of ways, this is one of the most terminally online movies ever made. When you have like Twitter brain rot and you get served like all of the movie production news. And
this is a movie that was made for the Facebook AI of Jordan Peele confirmed to make the new Avengers movie, like that kind of content.
It's just we've reached like peak. I don't need just the internet being referenced in movies in terms of like what the conversation is, and it's, you're right, it's tough to tell like how much that permeates outside of the core base, the niche of superhero movies, because we just came out of an era where it seemed like that had become extremely mainstream, and that the understanding of this world and these characters was no longer just a niche thing, but a much more accepted thing. But this movie takes it a much, much further, up its own ass type direction, where it's not just about the characters. It's about like the conversation around the movies and the reception and the studio machinations and all of these things that are just like way, way, way beyond what the story is, and this movie barely even has a story. We can mention it in the spoilers, the specifics, but it's not a movie about anything. It is a delivery mechanism of bloody action, meta jokes, and cameos, and it's incredibly janky. If it's a theme park ride as movie, it's the jankiest fucking ride at the theme park. It's like you think you're getting onto the brand new state of the art roller coaster, and it turns out to be a carnival.
You're on a wooden carnival ride that hasn't been serviced in 40 years. Like that's what you're getting on.
And it's telling you like, oh, isn't it funny that like you thought this was gonna be a good movie?
Isn't it funny how like unfunny this is right now? Isn't it fucking stupid that we're giving you all this exposition? Anyways, here's another 10 minutes of that.
Yeah.
What? No, you cannot fucking do that. No, this is I'm having like an existential crisis thinking back through this movie, because I really think that this movie is like poison. I think that this is brain rot at its finest. Like, what is this fucking movie? This shouldn't exist, dude. This shouldn't exist. This is the reason why we're always like preaching like movies are dying. People are going to see the movies. It's because of shit like this. It's because of like the stratification that is happening right now. We can't keep this going. We cannot do this forever. We have to pull the fucking plug. I really hope that this movie, I don't ever wish for any movie to bomb, but like I hope that this movie underperforms compared to what Disney wants, because I do not want this to set the lesson.
Abe, I have a feeling it might. I have a feeling that word of mouth on this might not be great, and that it could have a really big opening and then just fall off. That I feel like there's a good chance that might happen. So yeah, I didn't love the movie, but I found myself enjoying a lot of it. I really think that this is the kind of movie, and I felt this for a lot of Marvel movies recently, where it's like junk food. It's like you enjoy it when you're eating it, and then you feel like shit afterwards. Right? It's like, it's this feeling where like you're tricking yourself, you're convincing yourself that you're getting sustenance, and in reality you're putting garbage into your body. Like that's basically what's happening with these movies. And I've been sensing a pattern with the run that we've had of, you know, like the Marvels and Quantumania, take your pick of the last couple of years. I think there's varying degrees of quality there, but there's a stench on this whole thing. And for some reason, I was hoping that this was going to be good slop, that I was going to eat my slop and I was going to be like, yummy, yummy slop. Can't wait for more slop. And I'm just like, this is like rotten. This is like, there's like mold on this, and I don't like it. And I kept thinking, I was sitting there thinking like, I laughed. I think I had a good time. Like, I don't know. And then the more I think about it, it's like, I think my tummy hurts. Like something's not right,
I love the comparison to junk food. It really, for me, this is Arby's for me. Sometimes you just get a craving. You're like, I want some fucking Arby's fries. Like, let's go. I'm just going to go there. I'm going to get beef and cheddar. I'm going to get large Arby fry or something like that. And like the moment you take a bite, it's like, oh God, this is why I haven't eaten at Arby's in 4 years. And like, you can feel the food poisoning happening in real time. And you're like, why the fuck did I get a craving to eat this? I hate this. I feel bad about myself. I'm throwing up outside my car. Like, why is this happening right now that I got this craving to dive back in of like, oh, I'm going to go back to have Arby's. It won't hurt me this time. There's a reason. There's no reason why it has 2.2 stars on Google. I can still trust it. It'll be fine. And like, that's really what this is for me. Cause there was a part of me that's just like, man, I do remember when Marvel movies, they weren't going to ever like make a top 10 of the year, but they could at least,
there was a high floor.
They could be fun. They could be dumb fun. There was something that was there that was interesting. And now it's just at a point where it just like it hurts. It's really one of those things that I think we talked about. We've now brought it up a couple different times, but how like even though I think a movie like No Way Home was a successful movie for what it was, and it's probably the last successful Marvel movie. That was the worst thing to ever happen to Marvel because it made a bunch of money, and it was just like people like to remember. We're gonna
bring the Spider-Man back.
Bobby Iges was like, I got it, note taken. So you just want to see all your friends come back.
I mean, honestly, No Way Home is like Citizen Kane compared to this movie.
Dude.
This movie, in a lot of ways, is what I was worried No Way Home would be before I saw that movie. I was thinking that the Spider-Man would be just this like mindless cameo, and they were actually like core parts of the story. Even like Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe, like they served an actual purpose in the story. This is the opposite of that. And it's not, I wouldn't say, you didn't see The Flash. I wouldn't say it's as bad as what they did in the Flash. In The Flash, where they bring back like the AI deep fakes of Christopher Reeve and, you know, all these like Adam West, that is just disgusting, like bottom of the barrel shit. This is not as depraved as that, but it is very much in the lane of like, we're gonna just give you the bare minimum of that nostalgia and that hit, and it's going to be incredibly watered down, and we're not going to take the time to actually tell a good story. We don't value your time as an audience to even give you that. We think that you'll be okay with just like the bare minimum, and Wolverine will wear his mask, and you better fucking like it or else.
You better fucking clap. I do think Hugh Jackman is like as good as you can be in this role with the content that is around him. There's a couple sequences where it's like, hey, Hugh, maybe you might want to take up golf with your buddy Joe. Like you might want to drop out and hand this over to a woman.
We all get old,
to a
buddy.
young woman.
That's okay.
Because brother, you are fucking old, my guy. Like those are not your muscles. That is not your body jumping through that bus.
It did look very artificial a lot.
It looks like shit. It looks like shit. A lot of the stuff with him. Like whenever it's a quiet moment with him, it's good. And then like, I'm almost already interested. I'm not going to buy this movie at home, but to like look at it at home, because I feel like it's going to be one of those things like Fast and the Furious is one of the worst with this, with Vin Diesel stunt doubles, but wherever it's like very clear the moment that a stunt double is coming in.
Well, now it's all just CGI. Like they don't even need a real person to do it. It's just full CGI.
But it's so funny. There's one moment where we can transition to spoilers after this, but there's one moment where Hugh Jackman's sitting around the fireplace, and the only thing that I could think of, because the way that his biceps look, is the episode of SpongeBob where he gets the inflatable arms to try and look ripped. And that's literally what it looks like. His arms are like the size of his torso. And it's like we jacked up a little bit too much on the HGH scale. We got to scale that back down a little bit, guys. That is not a human arm anymore that I'm looking at.
So overall, not a great movie. I think I am still clinging to the last little bit of shred of enjoyment I had of it. I'm feeling like a 5 out of 10 barely, but like I said, it's aging like milk. So I feel it's slipping. So I don't think it's going to hold. So we'll see. It's one of those things where like, now that it's, I slot it into the letterbox list of all the other Marvel movies, and I'm like, it can't be a 6 out of 10. It's got to at least be a 5 out of 10 in comparison to all these other ones. And it starts to make me reevaluate something like Eternals. So that's just how my brain works. It's just trying to compare all the Marvel movies to each other and seeing which ones kind of stick in my brain the most, and thinking what might I want to revisit. That's just kind of how I measure my enjoyment. So not a good movie
I need to go back.
by any means. But I guess there's something still in me that says like, this wasn't a total failure.
I need to go back through and look at, here's my list. I was trying to look through here. This is an old list that needs to be updated. Is this the worst MCU movie? It's right down there with Thor and Thor: The Dark World for me. I think this movie's abysmal, man. I think that at least Thor and Thor: The Dark World might have more ideas than this. Like at least Kenneth Branagh, he was using the hell out of them Dutch angles. Ain't anything that interesting looking in this movie.
It's again, it just goes to the question. I think for a lot of people, it's just going to come down to like, does the Deadpool shtick work for you?
Yeah.
And does the fact that this movie relies so heavily on just hitting those member berry pleasure centers and just kind of being dumb and meta, how well does that work for you? Because all these other like bottom tier Marvel movies, they at least are to some extent trying to be good and serious, you know? And I guess this movie kind of does that to a certain extent, but it's mostly just like shitting on itself actively.
Yeah. It's just like, it's saying if I shit on myself, you actually aren't allowed to shit on me,
right?
Which is literally the lowest form of art that you can possibly make.
Another thing I'll say before we get into spoilers is I tolerate listening to Ryan Reynolds, like looking at Deadpool and listening to Ryan Reynolds' voice. Looking at his face, I think I hate it. I think I despise.
Welcome to the club, baby. Welcome to Ryan Reynolds Hater Island. And it's not because of like the makeup or anything like that. It's just looking at Ryan Reynolds' face. I want to punch him. Just watching him on the screen, just watching him act. I'm like, I don't like this. I think this sucks. So, okay.